Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you today how to do the Highgarden Bracelet. So it's a bracelet that's based on herringbone stitch, and what it does is it allows us to use some Preciosa cup chain that is in it, and we're going to be holding it in there with some bugle beads. So we're going to do this as a full bracelet. For the materials that you'll need, you're going to need a number of different ones. We're going to be using 11 OC beads. We're also going to be using 2 colors of 8 OC beads, and then some 3 or 4 millimeter crystals or check glass on the sides. And then in addition to that, your cup chain. For mine here, I'm going to be working with some purples and grays and crystals. So I have smoky opaque dyed opal in the 8 OC bead. The other 8 OC bead I have is the silver lined smoky amethyst, a nice purple contrast, and then the bugle is the opaque mauve that I'm using that's going to be on the sides. In between here, then you can either use the 15s or the 11s, that's up to you. I'm going to be popping them out with the 11s. They'll look a little bit bigger than the 15Os that are in here. I'm using the silver lined gold of the 11 OC beads. And then instead of using check glass on the sides, I'm going to pick up and add some bling to match my blingy cup chain. So I'm using some Swarovski crystals on the sides of my bracelets. To put your bracelet all together, you're also going to need some thread and needles. I have 0.006 or 0.15 millimeter wildfire beading thread, and I'm using that in a white color because my colors here you can see through a little bit, and also you'll be able to see through where I put my clear crystals on, so I'm choosing the white color for that. To thread my needle, I'm going to be using my size 10 English beading needles, and I only need 1 needle for this project. And then I do have some super new glue here, and I also have a needle nose pliers to help me thread that needle, and then the glue to glue off the ends of it. The last thing that you'll need is a clasp or a closure. I'm going to be picking up a cup button, one of our cup buttons, to use as the closure for my bracelet as well. When you're looking for cup chain, you're going to be looking for cup chain, and you want to do about a ½ an inch shorter than your wrist when you're looking at that and when you're getting that cut. So we're going to get ready to work on this Highgarden bracelet. It is a 2-step bracelet, so we're going to be building the base basically, and then we're going to be going back in and catching the cup chain inside. So I have all of my beads out here in little piles. I'm going to be working with all of the beads first, and I'm using that 14.5 SS cup chain. I'm going to let that sit off to the side for now because I'm going to be adding that after the fact of building my base. If you're not sure and you've never done herringbone before, you may want to just look at it and watch the simple herringbone bracelet, the flat herringbone bracelet tutorial that's on here as well. Or you can pick up with me here and start to learn herringbone. What I've done first is I've done about 3 feet of beading thread. I'm going to be using about 6 feet total for my project, but I started out with 3 feet just so I would have less, and I've put a stop bead on. I've let about 6 inches at the end of my thread so that way I can put on my clasp. I have just a crimp tube here that all I'm doing is running my needle back 2 times through it. You'll see the thread on the side, and my needle is going away from the tail. That's going to stop my beads from falling off the end, but then I can take it off after the fact. Herringbone always starts out with a ladder stitch here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my colors. Next to my beads, I'm going to have my purple colors next to my cup chain, and then my silvery color is going to be on the outside next to my crystals. So what I'm going to do is figure out which color I want my base. That's going to be my silvery color, and I'm going to put on 4 beads total and let that fall down next to my crimp tube and my stop bead. I'm going to take my needle back through the first 2 beads that I put on, and that's the first 2 beads that are next to the stop bead going away from the tail. What that's going to do is start this ladder stitch and force those 2 sets of 2 next to one another. I'm then going to sew down, the needle's going towards the tail this time, down through the last 2 beads that I put on. Pulling nice and tight. If it moves away from your stop bead, you want to go ahead and kind of snug that up so that way it goes right back to there. After that, I'm going to do another 2 wide and go circling in a circle back through those last 2 beads in the same direction that I just came out of. So I'm going back towards the tail here. And then I'm going to circle through those last 2 beads that I just added away from the tail. And here's where you get your ladder stitch that you can really start to see. And all it is forming those circles. Right now I have 3 beads on. I'm going to be doing a total of 6 wide of this ladder. So again, 2 more beads go on. I'm sewing in a circle back through the previous 2 that were added. And then I'm going to sew back through the 2 that I just added. Again, this is ladder stitch, and this is how we're going to form our base to attach our herringbone. 2 more beads go on again. Because remember, I want to do 6 wide. This is going to get me 5 wide. And then we'll do 1 more, so that way we have it 6 wide total. And we have that 6th row on there, and we're sewing back down. So your last bead, or your last thread, is going to come out on the same side as the stop bead. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get to the start of my herringbone, and to do that I want to go up through my bead, so that way I'm coming up here on the side. Just to decorate it a little bit on the side, I'm going to use one of my 11-ohs, and then I'm going to sew up through the second to last seed bead that I put on the end. And all that's going to do is just decorate the side a little bit with one of those seed beads. Now I'm going to go in and start my herringbone stitch. For my herringbone stitch, it's going to be that 2 beads go on, and then I'm going to sew down a bead, and those are going to kind of lay to the side, and then I'm going to sew up a bead. Because I'm going to keep this middle center open, I'm just going to sew down a bead and not put anything there. And then I'm going to sew up a bead. So basically I skipped putting on my herringbone in the middle there. If you've done or would like to do another herringbone bracelet that starts off with the same style, the Grecian starts out the same way. So I just have my last 2 beads to put on now. So I have 2 beads on my needle, and then I'm going to sew down my last bead on the end there. Once I have those in place, I usually flip it in my hand so that way it makes it a little bit easier to hold. At this point now I'm going to start to decorate my side a little bit. So you can use crystals, you can use some seed beads, it's up to you. Again, I'm using the 4mm Swarovskis. Once I'm coming out that second row, I'm going to sew back up through to the top of that herringbone and add a crystal on the side. Pull my thread through, and it's just going to decorate the side nicely with that little pop of crystal. Again, I'm going to go back to my herringbone, and now I'm going to change my colors. So that way I have the purple next to my beads. So I have a silver on and a purple on. That's what it's always going to be on the outside. I'm going to sew down through my bead here. And again, make sure that they're kind of laying over. And you're always going to see a little bit of thread with herringbone stitch as it goes kind of through the middle there. Once I come out the side here, I'm going to start adding to get ready to add my cup chain. So I'm basically going to form the bracelet, and then I'm going to go back and put the cup chain in place. On the sides of the cup chain, and to hold it in place, I'm going to add an 11-oh, a bugle bead, and an 11-oh. And I did forget to mention that these are 3mm bugles. I'm going to go to the other side of my herringbone here. So I'm basically, I kind of have that middle open. And once I go to the other side here, I go up a bead. I'm going to pull nice and tight here. Oop, not get my thread all twisted. Oop, I got my thread twisted around my seed bead here. Okay, and we're going to pull. And then once I'm coming out here, I'm going to continue with my pattern. So on go my purple and then my silver. I'm going to come out the side and finish that row. Once I'm done that row and I'm on the side here, I'm going to put on one of my crystals and sew back up through the last silver bead that was added. And that's going to get that row finished. Now as I add, I'm going to add another silver and a purple, go down through my purple from the previous row, turn my beads so they're coming out correctly. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an 11-0 seed bead onto my needle, but I'm going to share that bugle. So I'm going to just use my needle here and go through that same bugle bead. So I'm not adding another bugle, I'm sharing it. And it's going to pull it a little bit separate. I put on another 11-0, and then I'm going to sew up my purple bead on the side. When I'm coming out there, I'm going to go a purple and a silver, down through the silver, continuing my herringbone stitch. Make sure to turn those in place, and then on goes a crystal. So you can see I'm constantly turning my herringbone piece as I'm working with it. I usually like to flip as I'm working, so I'm always kind of working and sewing up. Once I'm out then, and after I've added my crystal, I add my 2 seed bead colors, my silver and purple. Pull my thread that whole way through. And once I get to the middle, I'm going to add another 11-0, a bugle, and an 11-0. So whenever I'm on the side of my stop bead, I know that I'm adding my bugle. When I'm coming back, I'm just adding the 11-0s and sharing the bugle. Once I come out here, I add my purple and my silver, sew down through. Oh, I got 2 on there. Let's take that guy back off. An extra bead wanted to join. Okay, once I'm at the side then, always when you're coming out the side, you're always going to add one of your crystals. So add my crystal, and I'm sewing back up through the last bead added. Give it a nice tight pull always with your herringbone stitch, because you don't want to have a lot of thread showing. I'm adding my silver and purple and coming back down. And then again, I'm sewing down here towards my stop bead. So I know that I'm going to add 1 seed bead. I'm sewing through my bugle. So I'm sharing that bugle bead, and I'm adding another 11-0 seed bead, and then up my purple. So basically when you're looking at it, and as we have more going on here, you're getting a little X that's going on in the middle with the bugle beads. That also helps to keep track of whether or not you've shared the bugle, because if you only have 1 on each side, you know you're not going to add another bugle. We're going to continue to do that same pattern, making this bracelet longer. And you can keep this bracelet just as is, you don't need to add the cup chain to it. But that 14.5, that SS 14.5 is going to sit really, really nicely inside when we get to it. So we're going on here and continuing to add. And then what I'm going to do is show you how the cup chain is going to fit in. So right now I'm not worrying about the cup chain. We're going to continue to do this for the whole base. And then we're going to come back, and we're basically going to punch that chain or cup chain right in between our bugles, and it's going to sit right in between. And then we're going to create a little net on the back in order to hold the cup chain in place. So I'm going to continue on doing this herringbone stitch where I'm sharing the bugle and kind of creating an openy, lacy middle. So just to show here, I'm getting a little bit longer in my herringbone stitch, and you're having that nice pretty ladder going in the middle between those rows that you can see the bugle beads, and you're having the crystals on the outside, and you can really pick which color you want to do this in. But then what we're going to do again is we're going to pop our cup chain inside there, and then afterwards we're going to come back and we're going to hold it in place. So it's going to be able to fit right nice and in place, that we're going to kind of pop those right in there. You can start to see it a little bit, take its form and take its shape. But I'm going to continue on building the bracelet the whole length of my cup chain. Again, I'm going to do it a little bit shorter than what I want my actual wrist length to be, because I am going to leave room for a clasp. So here I'm showing just the length of the bracelet getting longer. You could do this as a choker necklace. You could also do it that you keep the cup chain out of it. But I'm just continuing on with my herringbone pattern, and it gets quite repetitive. It's a good sit in front of the TV and work on it sort of one. It moves fairly quickly, even though it is a little bit more complicated of a pattern. The only thing that I find that takes the longest is when you're going into that bugle for the second time. I take my fingernail and I push that bugle up. That allows me the space to get in there to pull my thread through and to work with my needle. Then when you're on the sides, it's quite quick to whip up. And again, I just do a little turn in my hand, so that way I'm kind of on the side. And you're just continuing with that whole herringbone style to get that nice, very pretty ladder look that we're going to throw the cup chain in between. So I've gotten to the end of my herringbone here, and you're going to use about 27 or 28 crystals per side. You use 1 crystal per 2 rows of herringbone, basically. And when I get to the end, all I've done is to know that I'm at the end is I've popped my cup chain in place. So the cup chain, it can come out, and I'm just adding it in between those little ladder rungs. You're just going to flip it over and press it up into place. And that's going to get that finished. So I know that I've done my last little ladder section, adding 2 11-0s on each side, and I'm getting ready to do the end. Our end is going to mimic the start, which is the ladder stitch. We're also going to add your clasp. I'm going to be using a cup button in the purple color to match. And what I'm going to do to finish, and you can take your cup chain out or keep it in at this point, that's up to you. I'm going to just keep it in. To finish, I'm going to mimic again that start. So the way that I started was with 2 of my silver beads going in place. I'm going to continue my herringbone, so I'm going to use 1 of my 11-0s, 1 of my bugles, and 1 11-0. Go up into the last portion here of the herringbone. And again, silver on both. The reason I used that is so there wasn't a big difference between the start of the ladder stitch and your project. So now that those are in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and do my ladder stitch. Instead of putting a 4mm crystal on, I'm going to put an 11-0 seed bead. I'm going to go up the side, just like if I was going to get started. Our ladder stitch down here is too wide, so I'm going to dump out a couple more of the smoky dyed opaque opal. And I'm going to make it too wide. So to do that, I'm going to use 2 beads at once for my 1 row, and then another 2 beads. So you're putting on 4 beads total. And I'm going to run through that bead closest to the bugle on the herringbone. And kind of make those beads sit up in place. I'm going to reinforce that before going on to my next one. And I'm just going to put 2 up and go around in a circle. There we go. And come down. That's going to get those first beads in place. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it wider. So to do it wider and to get it finished, you can do 3 or 2. I'm going to do my 3rd bead. I'm going to take that around the whole way. Go down the 3 that you just put on. So I'm coming out here on the side. I've added 3, and I'm going to go down the 3 that I just put on in a circle fashion. And that's going to put those 3 right there at the end. Back up through 3. And that's getting me the end. Again, 3 more go on. Going up the 3 that I just put on. And then down the current 3. Just like that. So I'm just repeating that ladder stitch. And we're going to make sure that that's nice and tight. And this next row that I'm going to put on, I want to join into my herringbone on the other side. So I'm going to go up that silver herringbone bead, add 2 more beads, and down. Again, circle around, just like ladder, coming out the top. And once I'm coming out the top here, I'm going to add 2 more beads to finish out my ladder stitch. So herringbone is really great because the ladder at the end really allows you to kind of do whatever you want in the middle. I'm going to reinforce it, going up those 3 beads. And down as well. Just kind of completing the whole row. And there we go. What I'm going to do for my cup button is actually put the cup button onto the bracelet. So that's why we have it a little bit wider and have it 3 in length here. And I'm going to put the cup button right at the end so that it's just part of the bracelet rather than hanging off the end. To do that, I'm going to go back through, oh, I went down 1 too many. I'm going to go back through my ladder stitch here so that I'm getting to the middle. So I'm going, just retracing my steps, going back down here and getting out to the middle. Where I want to come out is actually between the final 2 beads on either the 3rd or 4th row, the middle 2 rows. I'm going to go up my cup button, and to make it sit up just a tiny little bit, I'm going to use one of my purple beads of my 8s, and I'm going to add the cup button, going up the back of the cup button. And that's going to let that button sit right on top there if you can see it. When I get to the top here, I'm going to add one of my bugles, just a little bit lighter purple. I'm going to go down the other side of my cup button. I'm going to add a purple 8-0. And that's what it's going to look like there at the end. I'm then going to take my thread and my needle, and I'm going down the 2 beads that are next to. So on row 3, I came out between beads 2 and 3. I'm going to go down row 4 between beads 2 and 3. Basically right next to it. Just give a nice little tight pull, and that's going to put your button right in place. I'm just going to reinforce that by doing the same thing again. And then I'm going to get ready to come down and to get my cup chain right in place. Now that I have my button in place and just sitting right on top of the bracelet there, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get my cup chain to stay in place. Where you want to get your needle and thread back to after you're doing whatever type of clasp you decide is to get it coming back through the first 11-0 that is going right along the bar of the cup chain. So the cup chain in the back has a little gold bar that's going to run behind it, and that keeps all of the cups in place. And we're going to pick up on that. So we have our 11-0 that we're coming out of. We're going to add an additional bugle bead onto our needle, and then we're going to pick up the 11-0 that is diagonal. So I have my 11-0 that's on the diagonal. So you can see your 11-0 that's right there and the 11-0 that's right there. Once I'm coming out of that, I'm going to go through the 8-0 that's next to it, go through the first 11. That's going to hide my thread. I'm picking up another bugle, and again going through my 11-0 that's on the diagonal. And that's going to hold it in place. Pick up the 11-0 that's next by going through the closest 8-0. Go come out the 11-0. And you can really use anything along the back here. You could do more seed beads. I'm just using more of my bugles. And again, I'm picking up the 11-0 that's diagonal. So you can see the diagonal of the bugles that are happening right along the back, and that's holding my cup chain in place. So again, I have my 11-0 that I've gone through. Oops, and I went the wrong way through it. So I'm going to go back through. And I'm coming out of it because I went up through the wrong way. I've got twisted a little bit. What you want to do when you're coming through is make sure that you're going and sewing so that your needle is coming down the project. And that takes care of that. I'm going to pick up the next 8-0 and the next 11-0. I'm just going to continue to zigzag my project, adding the bugles and going through the 11-0s on the diagonal. When you turn it around and you have that zigzag pattern going, you really don't see any additional thread or anything additional going on in the front. I'm going to flip my project a little bit so you can see it a little bit better going this way. Going through my 8-0, going through my 11. When I come out, putting on my bugle, and go into the opposite 11-0. And really this is just going to continue going the whole way along the project. The only reason I'm doing this is to make the cup chain stay in place, and it's also going to force the cup chain to sit up a little bit. So getting to the end of my zigzag here, and you can see it actually has a nice little pattern going up the back, and when you flip it over, your cup chain is in nice and tight. And what I'm going to do when I finish is I'm coming out of my last bead here, and I am going to put a bead on the diagonal. And that should help to hold that last piece of cup chain in. The last piece, if it does drive you nuts, you can kind of glue it up. That's up to you. When you're wearing it, those ends, they can kind of fall down a little bit, but as you're wearing it on your skin, those should stay up. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to basically get rid of this tail, and I'm also going to make a loop that will fit my cup buttons. And the loop that I make out of the cup buttons, I'm going to make with my gold 11-0s. So what I'm going to do is I want my loop to come out from the middle. So I'm going to get back to the middle by just re-sewing along my line. I'm going to sew right along that ladder stitch line. So down those 3. Oh, just down 2, my fault. So down those 2. Let's go back up. So just sew down 2, not 3. Sorry about that. Then when you come out in one of the middle, so your middle row of your ladder stitch is 2 rows 3 and 4. When I'm coming out the middle there, I'm going to make my loop to attach onto. My loop for my cup button, when you're using 11-0s, about 27 or 28 11-0s make a really good loop for the cup button. So I've got my 27 beads on, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down through row 4. And that's going to make a loop. And obviously if you're doing different closures and clasps, they're going to be a little bit different however you're putting them on. But it's basically the same. I always say the clasp when you're putting it on is kind of like sewing on a button. And I have my closure right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely reinforce that. So I'm coming back through, because whenever you have your clasp, you want to go through at least 2 times. I could even do a little bit of a peyote stitch if I wanted to decorate the end of that. I like to do that on a lot of my own personal bracelets. But for this one, I'm just going to run my thread right back through all of those 27 beads. That's going to allow me to have a little bit more thread and stability on my closure. Once I'm out that last bead, I'm just going to bring my thread so that it ends right at my starter thread. Sew it down the side. Once I get to this point here, I'm going to take off my stop bead. If it wants to come. Sometimes it's hard to get your stop bead off. And what you end up doing is either breaking the bead or actually putting a needle on and retracing the thread steps. I'm going to take that off, and then I'm going to tie these 2 ends right together. So now I have the end of my thread knotted off, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to just dab a dot of glue on all of my little thread ends, and then I'm going to cut them short. And you have a nice bracelet that is a little on the wider side, and you can use whatever kind of closure or clasp you want. Again, I'm a fan of the cup buttons, so I use that on the end of it. But it has a nice look to it, a wide look with the crystals on both the sides and the center. You can downplay it if you don't want it as wide, or if you want the crystal cup chain to stand out a little bit more. You can basically just delete those beads on the side or just add in a little 11O. But it's a really fun bracelet to work with, and it's a good use of the cup chain and holding it in place. Again, it uses the cup chain and the crystals, and I have my cup buttons. So thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoy making this Highgarden bracelet. If you get a chance, check out the rest of our YouTube videos, as well as check us online at PotomacBeads.com. And you can check our locations page, visit our locations, or if you can't get to one of them, you can always shop online at thebeadco.com. Thanks a lot for watching.